सुर मेरा तुम्हारा, तो सुर बने हमारा। सुर की नदियाँ हर दिशा से बहके सागर में मिले, बादलों का रूप लेकर बरसे हल्के हल्के मिले सुर मेरा तुम्हारा, तो सुर बने हमारा। मिले सुर मेरा तुम्हारा।
सान तरज थई म्यान तरज, इकवट बनिए सान तरज।
तेरा सुर मिले मेरे सुर दे नाल, मिलके बने एक नवा सुर ताल। मिले सुर मेरा तुम्हारा, तो सुर बने हमारा।
मुंहिंजो सुर तुंहिंजे सां प्यारा मिले जॾहिं, गीत असां जो मधुर तरानो बणे तॾहिं।
सुर का दरिया बहके सागर में मिले,
बदलांदा रूप लेके
बरसन होले होले।
இசைந்தா நம் இருவரும் சுரமும் நமதாகும். திசை வேறானாலும் ஆழிசேர் ஆறுகள் முகிலாய் மழையாய் பொழிவது போல் இசை நம் இசை.
నన్నదనిగే నిన్నదనియ,
తీరిదంతే నమ్మదనియ.
నా స్వరము నీ స్వరము സംഗമമൈ മനസ്വരങ്ക അവതరించి,
എന്റെ സ്വരവും നിങ്ങളുടെ സ്വരവും ഒത്തുചേർന്നു നമ്മുടെ സ്വരമായി. তোমার সুর মোদের সুর,
সৃষ্টি করু কই কসুর। তোমার সুর মোদের সুর, সৃষ্টি করু কই কসুর। সৃষ্টি হোক ওই কোতান। তোমা মোরা স্বরর মিলন সৃষ্টি করি চালু ঐক্যতানু। મળે સુર જો તારો મારો, બને આપણો સુર નિરાળો। माझ्या तुमच्या जुळता तारा, मधुर सुरांच्या बरसती धारा। सुर की नदियाँ हर दिशा से बहके सागर में मिले, बादलों का रूप लेके बरसे हल्के हल्के। ओ मिले सुर मेरा तुम्हारा, मिले सुर मेरा तुम्हारा, ओ सुर बने हमारा।
and what an evening it is. Like, I'm very proud to tell you that Chess Council of India, CCI, has planned this wonderful webinar today. The webinar topic is panel discussion of origin of a river, origin of a saint, and origin country of COVID-19 have always stood mysterious. Myself, I am Dr. N.H. Krishna, founder, chairman, trustee of Chess Council of India from Davangere, Karnataka. And before I start introducing you the panelists, let me have a brief word. You know, we are all bombarded by waves and waves of COVID. We in India, as of now, we are probably ending with wave 2 and we are expecting wave 3. This is not different in other countries where there are in wave 3, wave 4, and we are never sure at which wave it ends. So it's like we are getting bombarded by waves and waves, and it is high time that we plan that what is happening, and we really express our courage to tell that why this is happening, why it shouldn't have happened, and what should happen in the future. Let us always remember our basics, and let us even here start with our basics. Any suicide attempt, a poisoned case getting admitted to casualties, if the patient is in a state of awakeness, we will ask what poison he has consumed so that we understand the source of the poison to plan a perfect antidote. If the patient is unconscious, then also we will anyhow start the treatment as per the best of our knowledge to restore him back to life. But anyhow, this means knowing the root cause is always the best to halt the prognosis of the disease. This universal phenomenon is applicable everywhere and even to COVID-19 as well. How come the country of origin of COVID-19 has never stood transparent to WHO and the entire globe for the same? While billions are getting infected and millions are dying globally, how only few lakhs are only getting infected there and only thousands have died in your country, which is actually having the highest population in the entire globe? We are happy that you have controlled the mortality and morbidity brilliantly, which any highly advanced country that cannot do it. Please help telling the world as how you controlled it, how the origin country has less number of cases, how the origin actually happened, how the developed countries couldn't achieve your success of control over COVID-19. Behind every success, there is a mantra. What is your mantra? It is often blamed that the companies which make antivirus software are the one to develop new viruses to create inside a software. Let me politely request you, if you already have an antivirus software or antidote, please tell it to the entire globe. As your country doesn't reside in different planet from where people don't come to earth and travel back at all, remember your country is staying inside this earth where your people visit different countries frequently, and also it is vice versa. You are actually bound to answer the entire globe. It is now or never. With this brief introduction regarding the topic, let me come to introduce my esteemed panel. So I'm proud taking the name of each and everyone here. Initially, I'll go ahead introducing Professor Dr. Suryakant, who is the moderator of today's webinar panel discussion. He is the professor and head Department of Respiratory Diseases, KGMU Lucknow, National Vice Chairman IMA AMS, past President ICS NCCP ICAAI. He is a fantastic orator both in English and Hindi. Our next panelist today is none other than the Raja of Indian Pulmonology, Dr. Raja Dhar. Dr. Raja Dhar has his MD Respiratory, MRCP, MSc, CCT, FCCP, Director of Head Pulmonology, CMRI Hospital, Calcutta. And Dr. Raja is acclaimed not only in India, even worldwide for his brilliance in pulmonology. Welcome, Dr. Raja. Welcome, Dr. Suryakant, sir. And we have one more legend to whom we call as the Einstein of CCI, Dr. B.V. Murali Mohan. He's also recently got elected as the Chief Editor-in-Chief for the upcoming CCA journal, which is titled as Alveolus. He is from Bengaluru. He is MBBS, MD General Medicine, MRCP UK, FRCP Glasgow. He is a senior consultant pulmonologist and academic director, both for the Department of Internal Medicine and Pulmonology at Narayana Hrudayalaya, Bengaluru. My next panelist is Dr. Agam Vora, perfect combination of humor with brains. He will be the star attraction today for every one of you to hear, because we all talk, he makes you laugh. Dr. Agam Vora is from Mumbai. He is MD Chest and TB. He is in KL Somaiya Medical College, Mumbai. He is also the West Zone Governor of CCI. Dear Agam Bhai, welcome. And
thank you, Ji.
Only everywhere if you have guys, that's not attractive. So we have a beautiful lady here who is also brainy, and she is none other than Dr. Amita Nene. She doesn't require much introduction. She is the head of this Department of Respiratory Medicine, Bombay Hospital, Mumbai. Her qualifications go on to be MD, DTRD, FCCP USA. She is also a crystal clear orator. So what a beautiful panel we have today. And I am very happy to tell you that now at this minute, we already are having 5,889 logins. So we are all there to reach perhaps 10 to 12K by the end of this webinar. This is a history created that even before we started talking here, we have 5,889 logins as of this minute. My sincere thanks to our educational partner CIPLA for their support, and the CCA team and the CIPLA team in special, and CCA team also. Our webinar coordinator, Dr. Vijay Kumar Chennam Chetty. I also thank the efforts of this number of logins too. Our Atri Gangopadhyay, East Zone Governor, our current President, Dr. Narendra Metuku, and our current National Secretary, Ravi Dosi. And I also thank a supreme most person who is the co-founder of CCA, Dr. Narayana Pradeep, who is the co-founder along with me to found CCA from Kasargodu, Kerala. So thank you everyone. After this, we will have a presentation from Dr. Suryakant sir, an introductory one for the 10 minutes, which will be the backbone for the entire discussion is going to happen. And wherever, if I do not answer any question, Dr. Rajadhar will be answering those questions. And if the Raja doesn't answer, then we will end webinar right there and then. So, so I'm asking the technical persons, kindly go ahead playing the video presentation of Dr. Suryakant sir. Dr. Suryakant sir, please.
A very good evening to all of you. Namaste. Now today we are here, of course, for a webinar organized by Chest Council of India, that is on origin of a river, origin of a saint, and origin country of COVID-19 have always stood mysterious. And this webinar basically originated from a, of course, concept by CCI founder, Dr. Krishna, my younger brother, and of course, and that's why today we have gathered for this wonderful topic. So come to the background introductory slides. And of course, after this, we will have a panel discussion from very esteemed panelists throughout India. So if you see the origin of river Ganga, that is ought to be the very important and holiest river of India. So everybody knows that it is still sad that basically it is the story of Sagar, and it is the story of Bhagirath, and it is the story of Lord Shiva, how this Ganga from the heaven came to the land. If you see the origin of saint in our mythology, then the Saptarishi are the 7 sages of Indian mythology, and they are called as son of Brahma. They were the earliest saint, I would say. So that is also important origin of saint in this country. Now, somewhere you listen the mystery, sometimes you listen the myth. So what is mystery and what is myth? So very important to differentiate what is mystery or what is myth. quality of being is strange and secret and full of things that are difficult to explain. This is called mystery. An idea or a story which many people believe, but that does not exist or is a false, is called myth. The origin of COVID-19 could become another unsolved modern mystery. At the origin of pandemic remains uncertain. The political agendas of government and scientists have generated thick clouds of obfuscation. Neil Armstrong, he said that mystery creates wonder, and wonder is the basis of man's desire to understand. Very important. Now, if you see the worst viral pandemics in last 100 years, means in 1 century, if you see, these are the 8 important worst viral pandemics in last 100 years, and I will not say anything, I would not name anything, and out of 8, if you just see the origin of these pandemics, you will find some red names, and these red names are from particular country. So this is the COVID virus, appears to be very beautiful, but in Hindi there is kahavat, जो खूबसूरत है वो खूबसूरत बला भी हो सकता है. So don't go for the beautiful nature, beautiful appearance of this virus. This is very deadly. And if you see the disease count, the death count, and case fatality ratio throughout the globe and India, you will be surprised to know that it is huge. 18 crore total cases till date, and out of which only 3 crores in India, 38.9 deaths throughout the globe, and 3.92 lakhs deaths in India. So India is having only 10% burden of the mortality and around 16.5 burden of the disease. And of course, if you compare the case fatality ratio, the national average is 2.3 and India is 1.3. So nobody can say that India is not fighting COVID very successfully. Yes, we are. Out of the so many developed countries, the countries with the very developed health infrastructure, they were collapsed. But India has fought this fight very bravely and very, of course, efficiently. The question arises, how the spread continued to Wuhan suddenly spread to Philippines? A lot of questions will be raised during this background presentation, and a lot of answers and different kind of versions you will get during the panel discussion. The problem is that Philippines reported its first death on February 2, while Wuhan was confirmed to be cut off by the Chinese government dated 23 January. Then how it reached to Philippines? That is the question. Then the spread continued to Italy, Iran, Brazil, and so far countries, you see, so far distant countries from China. If you just see the distance of these countries is not only in 100, it is in 1,000. 7,560 kilometers China to Italy, 4,000 kilometer distance China to Iran, and 16,000 kilometers China to Brazil, and of course US. So much distant countries, and they have a lot of cases of COVID-19. But what is the problem inside the China? What are the barriers which could, of course, ban the COVID-19 to spread inside the same country, the origin of that country, illness? And if you see that the distance between the Beijing and Wuhan, it only around 1,000 kilometers. The distance between Shanghai and Wuhan, it's only around 800 kilometers. Distance between Tianjin and Wuhan is only around 1,100 kilometers. But why there are less number of cases? If you just compare with the cases of these cities in the China and of course a lot of other countries, there is a major difference, drastic difference. So we will discuss the place of origin. One theory is that it is coming from the bat. The question is, the previous 2 coronaviruses, SARS and MERS, were found mainly from bats living in the caves in Yunnan, a province of southern China. In the COVID-19 virus originated naturally from bats, then people living around the Yunnan caves would have been the firstly infected. But that doesn't happen. That would strongly support the idea that the virus had spilled over to people naturally, but that doesn't happen. But this not happened. Why? Because the pandemic broke out 1500 kilometers away in Wuhan. And however, the bats range is only 50 kilometers. So it is unlikely that would have happened to Wuhan naturally. So that's a big question, a geographic question. Why are we searching the origin? The question is why today we are having this panel discussion? Why we are having these questions? What is the interest? What is the purpose of this webinar? Firstly, to find the source, and if it's still out there, we can prevent future reintroduction of the same virus into the human population, number one. Number two, second reason is that if we understand how this one jumped from bats origin into humans, we can perhaps prevent similar events in the future to prevent future similar pandemics. Thirdly, to develop more efficient treatments and vaccines. Origin of COVID-19 virus, what are the various probable hypotheses? Now, very important, the original hypothesis given by China, and it is being circulated throughout the globe, is the virus evolved naturally before spilling over into humans from an infected animal, that is bat. The virus evolved. The second theory is that the globe is speculating, most of the scientists, they are speculating, the virus evolved naturally, but employee at the lab become infected from a sample and accidentally leaked it into the community. The third theory is, which now majority of the scientists believe, that scientists at the lab were manipulating virus samples and accidentally or intentionally release the pathogen. Now, yes, we have to solve these three questions during this panel discussion. Now, if you see what is the theory behind the natural origin of the virus, suppose it is the primary target, it was bats. In the SARS-CoV-2, the intermediate host was the civet cats. In MERS-COVID, it was the, of course, camels, which were the intermediate host. But still there is doubt which one is the primary host, which one is the intermediate host during COVID-19 infection. Still, this is a big question. Similarly, now people are saying that intermediate host, first they said it was pangolin, then they say other zoonotic animals, but still it is not resolved. The debate is going on. To this zoonotic theory or the natural theory is that the first cluster of COVID-19 infection was traced to human seafood market in Wuhan, leading to early speculation that it may have been where the virus jumped from animals into humans. The decoding of the virus genome showed it belonged to a viral family known as beta coronaviruses, to which SARS-1 and MERS viruses also belong. And this is the meat market of the Wuhan, which is supposed to be the so-called origin of the virus. A group of virologists and others wrote in Lancet on February 19, 2020, conclude that this coronavirus originated in wildlife. Lancet letter had been organized and drafted by Peter Daszak, president of the Eco Health Alliance of the New York, you know, the agency which funded the viral research at Wuhan Viral Lab. Dr. Daszak's organization funded coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So there are a lot of doubts about this natural emergence. No evidence to offer the WHO Commission. So this theory is questionable. At White House press conference, Donald Trump, the earlier president, declined to assert this theory, and recently, new President Joe Biden announced a fact-finding committee to provide the report regarding origin of COVID-19 within 3 months. This is the very debated, very, of course, hot building that is called Wuhan Institute for Virology. And of course, Shai and her colleagues at the Wuhan Institute of Virology have performed high-profile experiments that made pathogens more infectious. Such research known as gain of function. And during panel discussion, we will, of course, have the questions on what is this gain of function theory and how it happened and what is the history. And if you go into the history, a lot of other viral diseases also, this is true that viruses escaping from the laboratories. This happened to smallpox viruses, SARS-1 viruses, and 4 times from the Chinese National Institute of Virology in Beijing also, and Singapore also, and other countries also during the SARS-1 virus infection story also. So now this is the leak theory. And this shows that yes, it can be also one of the theory, or this can be the intentional or accidental, of course, transmission from the lab by the fault of the scientist or anything. The highly anticipated WHO report on the origin of SARS-CoV-19 was released on March 30, and this also, of course, said that there are 3 or 4 possibilities. The final WHO report says that most likely root of SARS-CoV-19 emergence was from a bat lineage via an unidentified intermediate host with more frequent human contact. But the query is not resolved. A lot of questions will be asked during this panel discussion, and of course, at the end of this, conclusion will be made, and of course, that conclusion will be shared to the scientist world, to the professional societies, to the media, and to you. So thank you very much for listening on this background introductory slides, and now we will start the panel discussion. Namaste.
Because you have told everything here, and that could be the take-home message. And whatever, if difficulties come across, because you are the moderator and you are going to throw us the questions, if we cannot bat up them, we'll return the ball to you. You should bat it. Now, I request Dr. Suryakant sir to initiate the moderation and go ahead with the panelist. Thank you, sir. Beautiful presentation.
Good evening, dear friends. Thank you, Dr. Krishna. Krishna is not the complete film. It is the trailer of the film, and the whole film has yet to come. You see, I think you have arranged the very smart heroes, heroine. I think I'm the probably only villain. I think you said that you have included.
Raja is the villain. Raja is the villain.
So, okay, Raja is the villain. Okay, let the people decide. I think more than 6,000 people they have logged in.
No, he knows the reason. He knows the reason.
Important dignitaries, other from the medical profession, they have also joined, and a few my media friends from Hindustan Times, Times of India, and so many other people, they have also joined. Probably, I'm not sure. Dr. M.C. Mishra, ex-director of AIIMS Jalai, he has also joined. So that's a wonderful achievement, Dr. Krishna, for you and the CCI and for whole team. So now coming of course, after this introductory remark, so I think all of you are ready because I'm going to bombard so many questions to you. And the basic thing is, now this esteemed panelist here present in this webinar. In this webinar, we want the question of number 1, origin, spread, and how the original country controlled it. As you rightly mentioned, what are the mantras? If they are really mantras, that after 18 months of origin of COVID-19, you have only 91,000 cases and only 4,600 deaths. If you have really developed some kind of mantras or friendship with COVID-19, the tactics of the friendship with COVID-19 and these mantras, these should be shared to the whole globe so that we can save the humanity. And we also want what is the magic of confinement of cases inside your country and magic of spread of the cases globally. So such questions to be answered. And of course, the first question goes to you only, because you are the source of infection of this webinar. So,
Yes,
so Dr. Krishna, first question to you only. What are the different theories of emergence of COVID-19 in a nutshell, although we have background, but what is your opinion?
Sir, actually WHO has already told this, and I will also add my opinion. It is actually, it can come 4 ways. There are like 4 theories. One is having an intermediate host, like which is suspected to be pangolin in COVID-19. A direct zoonotic introduction, that is from bats or bat saliva falling on a meat. This is the second theory. And the third theory is introduction through cold and food chain. Like, as you very well aware, like we are all aware that is why we are wearing masks these days, that to avoid a droplet infection and to avoid any contaminated food or the contaminated air with the virus. So this is the third theory. and introduction resulting from a laboratory accident or incident. So it could be introduced while it is leaked from a laboratory, or it is that could be accidental or incidental. I don't want to mention that further.
Yes.
That is up to the research to understand that. So these are the only four ways, four theories from how the transmission can take place.
Dr. Krishna, if I
Yes.
just ask you, can you give number 1, 2, 3? Can you prioritize? What is your speculation? Which theory is number 1 now? Which
Sir,
theory is number 2?
sir,
Which is
according
3
to
and which is
my priority, the lab incident is number 1.
4? Okay, that's great. Dr. Agam Vora, so now from Karnataka, we are moving to the Mumbai. So, yes, how are your friends? Shah Rukh Khan, Salman Khan, Akshay Kumar, and of course the
Kareena Kapoor.
Kareena
Ask about her.
Yeah. So I think all your friends are happy and you are happy with them. So coming to my question is, how SARS, MERS and SARS-CoV-2, that is COVID-19, are related to each other? Can you tell the connections of these three important viruses?
Thank you very much, sir. First of all, I must compliment you for the excellent presentation that you made. You know, when this invitation came, I was thinking, if I have to make this presentation, how would I go about it? And I was completely numb. The way you did it was really awesome. And of course, Krishna, great. I could have never imagined doing a program on this topic and then to gather so many stalwarts and make everybody read. Oof, since noon, I was so worried. I said, what kind of questions are going to be there and what kind of answers I would probably give. Tough time I had. The question, how are these viruses related? These viruses are all cousins of each other. You know, they belong to the same coronavirus family. It is a family of all enveloped, positive sense, single-stranded RNA virus. We all know that there are 4 generations, alpha, beta, gamma, and delta, of which alpha and beta, they gain more attention because they have a potential to cross this animal and human barrier, and that's how they infect humans. They generally jump between birds and mammals. We are not too sure how this came from, as you showed in your presentation, from bats to humans, and there are theories which say that probably there was a pangolin in between, somebody feels there was cats in between, and there could be various other animals which played intermediary hosts role. But all these viruses have a lot of genetic similarity. In fact, in one of the papers I was reading, that SARS-2 has almost 80% genomic homology, in the sense resemblance to SARS-CoV-1, while about 50% similarity with MERS-COVID, meaning that they all are belonging to same family. That's the way I look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vora. Thank you, Agam, for wonderful, of course, interrelation comments. From Mumbai, I was thinking to go to the Bangalore, but a lady, of course, wonderful lady, beauty with brain, Dr. Amita Nene said, no, you stop here. You just take question from me. So I'm forced to ask the question to Dr. Amita Nene that can you tell us various points against the COVID-19 being a natural virus, a real challenge for you?
Thank you, Dr. Suryakant, for this interesting question, and thank you for the excellent presentation. You know, you actually have really made everybody's mood very, very excited to listen to all of us. And thank you, Dr. Krishna, for this excellent idea of this webinar. So basically, there are lots of people who are very skeptical about this being actually a natural virus, and people feel that this may be actually a man-made virus. So what goes against a natural virus is that the spike protein of the SARS-CoV-2 virus contains 4 amino acids, all 4 of which are positively charged. So basically, whenever you have an amino acid sequence, one positively charged amino acid has to be next to a negatively charged, then a positive, then a negative. Otherwise, if they are similar, then they'll repel each other. So naturally, you cannot have 2 positively charged amino acids next to each other. But in the spike protein sequence, there are actually 4 amino acid sequences. So all 4 which are present are positively charged. So this cannot happen naturally because they should be repelling each other. And if you have 4 positively placed amino acid charged sequences, then it is going to bind more efficiently to the negatively charged human cells. And this makes it very, very infectious and makes it even more deadly. So this is something which is very weird, which is so far never seen in naturally occurring viruses. The second thing is that there are about 22,000 types of coronaviruses which are available. Not a single one has inclusion of either HIV genomes or Plasmodium vivax and genes or DNA in it. Whereas SARS-CoV-2 actually has presence of the anti-malarial Plasmodium vivax also and HIV parts also. So this is actually something very, very strange. And these 3 points actually go against the possibility of SARS-CoV-2 being a natural mutation, and it could be some genetically engineered part. Probably, we don't know. We'll find out towards the end of the webinar. Thank you. You're muted. You're muted.
Thank you, Amita. It's always a pleasure to listen to you and to see you, and of course, to know your depth of knowledge. So you are perfect. You are a producer, director, and actor like Amir Khan in the film industry, Mumbai. So a person with perfection as far as the academics is concerned. Now, of course, Amita has given me permission to go to the Bangalore, and Dr. B.V. Murli Mohan is there. Dr. Mohan, what are the 2 ways of evolution of viruses? That is mutation and recombinant theory. And what do you think, which is coming too closer to this virus? Dr. Murli Mohan.
So first of all, Professor Suryakant, I think that was a brilliant presentation you started with. As Dr. Krishna said, we don't really need to have this discussion. You covered virtually everything. But this may be a way of exploring a little deeper into the questions that you raised. Second point I want to make, Raja is not the villain here. Raja is Raja.
I said I am the villain. Raja is always Raja.
Yeah, and Yata Raja Tata Praja. So that makes us all villains.
Sir, he was called villain because of setting the question paper.
so to answer your question, sir, there are the virus can change by mutations, and these can be point mutations or slightly larger than that. That means there is a change in the DNA sequence or the RNA sequence of any nucleic acid. This can be by change of just one nucleotide, which changes the entire sequence of the reading frame, and that will make a change in the amino acids. The other is by what is called recombinant technology or recombination, where a sequence from one virus can jump into another virus and gets absorbed into the DNA or RNA of that virus. And this can jump across species, it can jump across different genera also, and sometimes can be carried by other viruses like the bacteriophages, for example, carry sequences of genes from one bacterium into another. The problem is that you need a mixing pot, and very often a species like the pig serves as the mixing pot. We learned that in the H1N1, where sequences from birds went into pigs and then went into humans, and makes it more acceptable to humans and be able to infect humans. So we have both these. We have mutations and you have recombinations. The problem is neither of them really fits the origin of the coronavirus. It can't be natural. We don't have these sequences in any naturally occurring viruses where you would expect it to jump from one virus to the other. On the other hand, what you can do, and these are modern ways of engineering changes in virus. One is by using CRISPR technology, where you have a gene, the CRISPR, that takes a gene, you can cut it and cut it any way you want in order to tailor together a new gene. So that's one way. And they've used it in this very same, genetic manipulation, possibly by making viruses that can actually enter humanized rat lungs. And they've used this for research technology. The other way, of course, is to keep, growing generation after generation of viruses and choose which is the virus you want for something that is more able to infect humans if you want it to infect humans. So we have these different, more modern technologies, not relying purely on mutations occurring accidentally or genetic recombination techniques occurring naturally, but you can press forward and make this happen faster when you use CRISPR-Cas technology, or you can use selection of the most effective genes. And actually, this selection has been done throughout humanity. We've chosen the best seed for the next crop. We've chosen the best animals to get more, better quality, better strains of animals. And this kind of genetic engineering has been going on for a beneficial cause for a very long time. Whether it has really been used for the same reason in the generation of the SARS-CoV-2 technology is not very clear.
Okay. Dr. Mohan, you're always very meticulous. And I think if the audience can see the books behind the Mohan, you can see this is the induction effect. If even he doesn't read them, this is the induction effect that every knowledge, every part of this comes ultimately into his mind. So that's a wonderful story. What I will do in the background of Kalam Sahib and Swami Vivekananda is there, I will put some books also next time. So the next question is, of course, I'm going to the Calcutta. Yes, Kolkata. Dr. Raja Dhar. Dr. Raja, as Dr. Krishna mentioned, Raja of the Indian pulmonology. So we are the Praja and he is the Raja. So Raja, what can you tell us about the correlation of bats and viral respiratory diseases, more specifically about coronavirus disease and bats?
Thanks, Dr. Suryakant. Lovely presentation. I'll repeat what everyone else said and say that it was very nice, very lucid and very crisp and short. And Krishna Bhai, wonderful idea to put this webinar together. You know, I was skeptical to start with as to whether we could 1.5 hour session of this, but I mean, looking at this, probably we could go on all night and we will still have an audience. So, so let me quote one paper which started all this, Dr. Suryakant, and that's the Lancet paper from February 2020. So this was even before we had our first case of COVID in India. And interesting, I mean, I'll come to your question in a minute, but interesting that two journals of the stature of Nature and Lancet within the space of a month had to come out with two papers which were to propound that the virus occurred naturally. You wonder why, unprovoked, you had to have two different papers coming out within the space of a month to say that this was a natural virus and not a lab leak. The other interesting part is that when you look at these two papers, both of these papers had scientists as authors from the Wuhan lab. So you would have read an editorial which came out about the Lancet paper, which spoke about this conflict of interest about 4 months after the paper come out. So maybe that gives us a clue as to why people had to say, "Main chor nahi hu," even before chor was announced. So I think that's probably something worth thinking about. Now, I'll go to that Lancet paper because it answers the question that you asked very nicely. So there was a 2017 study, Dr. Suryakant, which looked at about 12,000 odd bats and tried to find out the incidence of coronavirus in these bats. So 12,000 odd bats across America, Africa, and Asia. And they found that about 9% of these 12,000 bats had a distinct coronavirus. Even more interesting, they found that about 3,200 coronaviruses could infect bats. And I think Amita actually alluded to this a little while ago. And more interesting, there were about 1,400 different species of bats. Now, I think I have confused you enough, but the important thing, and in line with what Murli said a little while ago, is that not all of these coronaviruses will have the mutations which are required to transmit them to a human host. So that's a paltry few. And these mutations, which would help transmission to a human host, can be natural or they can be engineered in a lab, the way Dr. Murli Mohan spoke about a little while ago. So the question, the option is two: are these viruses that get transmitted natural or are they man-made? And if they are man-made, are they man-made by design or are they man-made by accident? Now, and the science of what Dr. Murli Mohan described probably will go a long way, and sort of we'll discuss this as we go along. But suffice to say that while there are lots of coronaviruses, there will be certain small cohort of viruses which can be transmitted to humans. they will have reservoirs, animal reservoirs, and the bats will only manage to infect the humans or the animals in a small number of cases. So that's worth remembering. And then as we go on, I think we'll go into greater depth as to what makes an intermediate host and what makes a human host vulnerable.
Thank you, Raja. Marvelous. Well, you see, what is the beauty of Raja? Raja, when he speaks, he starts from nature. He starts from science. He goes to the Lancet. So that is the beauty. He's the well-read person. And you see, in the Indian Chess Society, he's said to be the Einstein of Indian Chess Society, as Dr. Murli was here in the Chess Council of India. So, Dr. Agam, so I'm catching again to you, Dr. Agam. You see the natural theory, then lab leak theory, then intentional or accidental, you see the spread theory. Very not so popular one more theory is that is called the food cold chain theory, which the WHO has suggested, but then never pursued and never argued and never discussed, nothing published. Then what do you think? This food cold chain theory, the origin of virus via transport of food by a cold chain, how it is justifiable?
That's interesting point. Of course, there was some discussion in the earlier part of this year, but then it cooled down. In my personal capacity, I always found it difficult to believe that there could be transmission from food, because in today's time, you don't eat uncooked food. So then by and large, when it is cooked and when it is prepared, this kind of virus is very unlikely to survive through that. And when it is ingested, it is very unlikely to give you the kind of disease that it has a presentation for. So the theory seems difficult to believe, but yes, there were initial papers which did speak about certain bets and certain animal products and certain diet habits that Wuhan city has, and the food which was frozen and transported out of Wuhan. But I, in my personal capacity, do not agree to the concept of its being transmission possible through cold food chain. My views to it.
Yes, I think you are right, Dr. Agam, because one of theory was this also, but I think now it does not hold. So now I will not take the risk that going Mumbai to Bangalore, I'll stay at Mumbai and of course ask the question to Amita Nene. Amita, most difficult question of today's panel discussion. You see, I just did a lottery system, and this is by lottery it came up to you. So I think lottery also favors you. So what do you understand by gene manipulation theory, or the theory that intentionally there was genetic engineering was done, of course, and it may be the origin of this virus? Dr. Amita.
Yeah, this is a very controversial and an interesting subject to really discuss. So the thing is that Dr. Murli has nicely told us about genetic manipulation. So basically, genetic manipulation theory is that from a particular organism, whether it's virus, whether it's a bacteria, it could even be a tumor cell. So basically, the thing is you're modifying the structure whereby you are removing amino acid sequences, or you're adding something of your choice, and you're completely changing the structure of that particular organism so that you can change the functioning. And therefore, in North Carolina, in the US, there was this lab and there was a huge project going on, which was known as gain of function. And this entire thing, and they had a lab, along with them, the Wuhan lab of China was carrying off with this gain of function theory, in which what they were doing was that, according to them, viruses can be really nasty and they can cause any kind of infection. So they were adding different genetic sequences into viruses, and they were trying to make it more and more lethal, more and more infectious, more and more fatal. And the funda they had was that after you have all the worst qualities, we will now make a vaccine, and this vaccine will take care of all future mutations of the virus, which can actually affect the humankind. So this is what the genetic manipulation theory was, and this is all was about the gain of function. And huge amount of money was being given to China, Wuhan lab, for carrying out all these experiments, etc. And it was, in fact, the Obama government which actually closed this entire function, and they stopped this funding, and they said this cannot happen. This is anti-humanity, because what if the virus escapes out? Then you get a very, very bad infection. So the North Carolina lab was shut, but the Wuhan lab continued genetic mutation and genetic manipulation. So this is something that so basically the Bat woman, the professor, Dr. Shi Zhengli, who is the main director of the Wuhan lab, she's known as a Bat woman because her interest is all the viruses of the bats, and she is trained, in fact, in North Carolina University, and it's her mastery to adjust the genes in such a way, splice the genes in such a way that nobody can actually tell that the gene has been manipulated. So this is a gene manipulation theory, and this is about gain of function concept, which Wuhan lab believes in, which all across the world has been banned.
So, Amita, with due regard to the, of course, female gender, so do you think that the Bat woman is the person behind this whole story?
I would not say that she has done anything purposely, but according to me, she's hiding a lot of things. Can I say some interesting stuff which can actually make a Hindi movie also? In 2 minutes, what I have made out of this, can I just say this?
Yeah, sure.
So basically in 2020, in February, so December, we came to know about 2019, we came to know about the COVID virus. So in 2020, February, Dr. Shi Zhengli, she came up with the actual structure of SARS-CoV-2. And the entire world looked upon her, and they were so impressed because somebody could finally isolate the structure. And she gave the entire genome. And in the paper, she also said that there was another viral culture which they had in their possession, which is known as RAGT13. And she said that 96% of this is similar to SARS-CoV-2. So there was this Canadian entrepreneur who basically felt that because the Wuhan lab is into genetic manipulation, what if they mixed and matched this RAGT13 virus, which was in their possession, and what if they made the SARS-CoV-2 virus? So he basically put up this theory, and there were a lot of researchers who started looking into it, and therefore they started going through every paper of the Bat woman. So interestingly, she had come up in 2013 with a paper where she said that there is a virus which they have isolated, which is from the bat, and it can infect humans directly through ACE2 receptor, and it does not need an intermediate co-host at all. So the SARS-CoV-2 also, we are really not sure, is there any intermediate host or not? We are talking about it, but the thing is that her one paper of 2013 said this, and she actually didn't say from where they got this virus, etc. But this virus was RABT 4199, and basically the structure was not given anywhere. But then whenever you find a new virus, you have to give it in the international database. So people found out from the international database that this RATG13 that she spoke about was similar to the RABT that was reported in 2013, exactly the same, which means from 2013, they had this. Then people started going through all the database of Chinese literature, and there were these PhD students who were doing the PhD under her guidance. So she had given one of the papers to one of the students who spoke about 6 miners who worked in the Yunnan province caves, and they got certain symptoms, and these symptoms are very interesting. So they got cough, they got malaise, they got fever. The CT scan showed ground glass, subpleural opacities, and pulmonary thromboembolism. And these people, out of 3 people died. Those who died either had comorbidities or all were elderly. So basically then questions started coming to her. What if this was a viral illness, which was, from Yunnan, if it came over here? And at that time she said, oh, that was a fungal illness. That wasn't a viral illness. But then another student of hers had done a thesis on the same thing. And there it was written that these workers had antibodies to SARS positive. So eventually then she had to actually accept that it was a virus, and she was involved in this study, and she actually added an addendum to her February 2020 paper. So all this is kind of quite fascinating. So
Amita, wonderful, wonderful retrograde analysis, wonderful. So I think we have to come another wonderful UC storyteller, Dr. Raja. The horseshoe bat, which seems to be the animal reservoir involved in not seen anywhere in Wuhan, especially the seafood market, which is the usual picture of Wuhan's seafood market, has the question of an intermediary. The intermediary here seems to be the pangolin. What is the peculiar about the pangolin which makes it an unlikely animal host? Number one. What are the other intermediary hosts that have been considered in case of the coronavirus? Two questions in one go.
Thank you, Dr. Suryakant. I'm still remembering the story that Amita said. So I'll sort of start off from there and also from what you said during your talk. So I think the first thing to say is that one of the things which looks suspicious with the SARS-CoV-2 virus, as Amita said, is the fact that this virus seems to be ready to be transmitted to a human host straight from a bat. So, you know, it doesn't need an intermediary host to get transmitted in the first place, which is again a first among coronaviruses that we have seen in the past till today. Now, if there is the requirement of an intermediary host, the next question arises, which is, why have we not managed to isolate this virus in any intermediary host till now? We are 1.5 years into the pandemic. We have not answered that question. So all the theories that have come from China about an intermediary host are theories, and we have never actually found an animal host, a reservoir host for the SARS-CoV-2 virus till date. So that brings us to the pangolin. So the pangolin is theorized to be the most likely intermediary host, the most likely reservoir. The reason it's unlikely is because in an intermediary host, like we have said, the host acts as a reservoir. We know that the pangolin actually gets infected and diseased from the SARS-CoV-2 virus to the extent that the pangolin would ultimately die from the SARS-CoV-2 in a small percentage of cases. So if it's a reservoir host, why does the intermediate host get affected in that case? It's not a question that we have managed to answer till date, but it raises questions about whether the pangolin is actually an intermediate host or a reservoir in this case or not. The other host that has been propounded is the anteater. Now again, the anteater is an animal which is found in the Wuhan seafood market, which is why we think that the anteater could be an intermediate host. It could be a reservoir host. But again, the anteater actually gets afflicted by this virus. It gets affected and gets the disease, and hence it's unlikely that it's a reservoir host. So we are probably left with Amita's theory, which is the fact that the disease probably gets directly transmitted from bats. And if that is the case, how did the bats fly 1,500 kilometers from Yunnan in south of China to Wuhan, where we don't have the horseshoe bats that you've spoken about just now? Again, a question that remains unanswered. So as we are going through this panel discussion, we are finding more and more questions which have got ominous connotations to which there are no answers. And as we go along, maybe we'll get some answers to these questions, Dr. Suryakant.
Thank you, Raja. So let's have a half-minute break. You see, I was just reviewing what are the important luminaries who are listening: Raja, Krishna, Agam Vora, Amita Nene, and Dr. Murli Mohan. And this is a very short announcement that Dr. M.C. Mishra, ex-director of AIIMS Delhi, he was the director before Dr. Guleria. He is listening to all of you. So wonderful. So, Aman, this is a very historical day, Dr. Krishna, for you, that you have generated a lot of heat and interest to the stalwarts like Dr. M.C. Mishra. I know him because I have been in the panel of so many TV debates, and he was also one of the speaker recently held a very important post-COVID management discussion done from the US. So thank you, sir, that you have joined on my request.
Warm welcome, sir, on behalf of Chess Council of India. Yeah. Warm welcome, sir. Privileged to have you here.
And a few other luminaries, that is the Gaurav Sehgal from Hindustan Times, and Dr. Sunita Yadav from Udaipur, Rajasthan, and so many others. I'll keep you updating because your technical advisor is very smart Mr. Vinod, and he's continuously giving me feedback who is joining, who is not joining. So wonderful. So this 20 minutes break.
Warm welcome, dignitaries. Warm
Krishna
welcome.
is not providing any tea, coffee to anybody anyway. Beer with us, beer with Krishna. So it is all due. I think we will take a grand party whenever we meet, of course, in
Definitely,
the near
sir.
future. So another question, of course, to Dr. Krishna only. Has there been example of lab leaks in the past? Number one. Can you give an example and discuss the result of that accident? What happened to the lab leak? It might help us to try and find some similarities with the current scenario, the theory of lab leak.
Sir, now that's a good question. Well, I will answer that. It's actually in the history twice it has happened. It has happened in 1971 and 77. And during 1971, this happened with the Soviet Union being there, and it happened near the Aral Island, where they were trying for this biological weapons. And it got accidentally leaked, and this was infected and got killed so many people, and this made 10 people to die, and this came into picture only by 2002. Now the second is, this happened right there in China itself. It's regarding the influenza virus, and in 1977 this incident happened. Actually, the very important question here is where both the leakages happened. These were not the standard quaternary lab centers. Like their grade, they were not upgraded to the, there are so many labs. And when we talk of the gain of function also, that appears here. Why people outsource a particular research, or why they do not want to get it done and in their own country, which could have been an example which Amita earlier stated regarding to US also, that they do not want to get their population infected and die of it for any probably accident that could happen. So such, and even this was explained that such labs should not exist, and they should not, basically they are not authenticated to go ahead with such risky tasks of virology research. I request Raja Bhai to further emphasize on this, because we have had a talk with each other. Raja Bhai, please.
Yes, Dr. Krishna. So
Yeah, Raja, please add.
Yeah, sure. So the incident that Dr. Krishna spoke about a little while ago from 1977, again came to fore about 15 years later, was about the H3N2 strain of influenza, where there was an incident of leakage with about 7 people within the lab and some members of their family getting infected. And it is in line with, so Amita spoke about the gain of knowledge theory, and so did Dr. Murli Mohan. So, I mean, I'll just briefly mention that in some cases, this theory is required, because what you're trying to do is to find out how many viral exchanges in the animal host is required before you actually develop a virus in an aerosol, which can be transmitted to a human. And like Amita said, that's important for 2 reasons. One is in the preparation of an epidemic or a pandemic, and the second is in the preparation of vaccines for that particular, against that particular virus. As Dr. Krishna said, that there are certain biosafety levels that need to be maintained in a lab before you can do these experiments of genetic manipulation, etc., in a virus. The Wuhan lab had that biosafety level. However, the one we are talking about just now from 1977 with the influenza virus did not have that level. And it was a historic occasion. It was kept under wraps for a very long time, but it was an important message to the community that the same level of biosafety needs to be maintained if these animal experiments, if these viral experiments, genetic manipulations need to be done in a particular lab. So that was an important lesson from 1977 from the spillage onto lab workers that Dr. Krishna spoke about.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Raja, for
Thanks for
adding,
elaboration.
of course, a few important things to the this question.
Dr. Suryakant, can I add a little to that?
Sure. I was coming to you only. Wow, what a coincidence.
So going back to this lab leak, there was also a lab leak in Singapore in about 2002, which may have heralded the SARS-CoV-1 or the SARS pandemic, And we must remember that though the Wuhan Institute of Virology has a biosafety level 4 lab, it has only one lab of that. The others are all biosafety 2 and 3, which don't give you the same degree of safety. And even in a biosafety 4 level, everything depends on the people, the personnel who are trained. And when the Wuhan laboratory was opened during the inauguration, they were visited by American diplomats who made it a point that while the lab has this level of safety, the personnel who use it are not trained adequately. And they don't have the adequate equipment to continue this. So that's something we must remember. There's a high chance of leakage. And in fact, the Singapore incident that I was mentioning, they left a student to do some work inside while the technician went away to attend a meeting. And that is how it spilled out. And these are human things, they can happen. You know, so no matter how much care you take, the Jurassic Park is fiction. But they make a very important point. Nature will find a way to come out. And we need to be aware of that. You know, so which is why the Obama government decided to stop funding this kind of work. But obviously the funding is being rerouted from other funds to continue the work in Wuhan and also in 2 American labs, in Texas and in North Carolina. There are 3 gain-of-function laboratories. So that is the problem. You know, it doesn't go away once you've started funding it.
Okay. Some more clarification from gain-of-function. A gain-of-function research has gained a lot of fame in recent times. China and the US has been drawn into this international controversy. And yes, it is the report coming that yes, some NGO from US funded this project. Can you please tell us about the gain-of-function research? Please provide, if you can give a good example of that.
So basically, when there is a mutation or genetic engineering and the gene changes, whether of a virus or others, a function can either be gained. For example, a virus can become more infective. It can become more infective to humans. It can gain function to get transmitted much more. That is a gain of function by a mutation. Most mutations actually lead to loss of function. Most mutations are not very helpful. They may enable survival, but they generally make the organism weaker. But for a function to improve, as far as the virus, for example, is concerned, makes it more transmissible, and therefore that virus is much more likely to spread. So even if 1 in 1,000 mutations is a gain of function, that is the one likely to spread, where the loss of function mutations don't spread. Now, what happens when you engineer or select for gain of function mutations is that a virus, for example, becomes more transmissible, becomes more able to infect humans, and becomes more able to cause damage in humans. And that is the problem with this. Now, why will anybody do gain of function experiments and engineer gain of function mutations? One is to use it as a bioweapon. And that is the fear that, you know, people who are being over clever, that biological warfare has come to stay. They want to be ahead of everybody else, and they deliberately engineer it. Now, there's no evidence for that. And we must be very clear about that. We shouldn't necessarily attribute malicious intentions to this. I'm sure this question will come up later, but that's something we need to remember. The other is the excuse that not only the Wuhan Institute has used, but also the Americans have used, is that when you have a gain of function research, you're already prepared because this is going to happen, whether it happens naturally or somebody with malicious intent comes out with a similar virus. That virus is going to come out someday, and we'd better be prepared because we can prepare a vaccine and then, be ready for it and generate huge amounts of vaccine as soon as this outbreak happens. And in fact, if you remember, Bill Gates also spoke about this in a TED talk, I think in 2014 or 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And again, I'm not blaming Bill Gates. I think he was very prescient. He was expecting things to happen, and everybody has expected things to happen. So to use this as evidence against him is completely wrong. But I think what we have to be very clear about is gain of function experiments are dangerous. There is one incident where it was done, where they engineered influenza viruses to affect ferrets and transmit from ferret to ferret, not waiting for it to go into an intermediate host. Okay, so that has already been done and shown to be successful. And that has rung alarm bells. It has raised ethical questions. And that really triggered off the whole debate that led the Obama government to, stop funding and ban this research.
Fantastic, fantastic, Dr. Murli Mohan. Really, you have gone into the depth of issue. So thank you very much for updating our panelists, updating our fraternity.
Raja Bhai wants to speak, add something.
Yeah, Raja.
So just wanted to sort of emphasize a couple of points which Murli has spoken about already. The first is about this H5N1 influenza virus that Murli spoke about. The fact that what they did was 14 exchanges between ferrets. So there was 14 different exchanges between ferrets till the time the H5N1 was in a state that it could be transmitted in an aerosol to a human. So this was the first time when with a viral exchange, there was the question of bioterrorism which came in. And if you remember, this was the research for which funding was stopped thereafter. And even the publication of this paper, if you remember, Murli, was actually stopped in its entirety. So there is a danger signal from this particular research. The other thing which Murli said, which stuck out, and I will just repeat that for emphasis, is that if you have natural transmission of virus, and when there are mutations due to natural transmission, usually the virus becomes less virulent. However, when there's a gain of function experiment, when there is bioengineering, when you create a virus artificially by genetic manipulation, that's normally where you gain function. The virus could either become more transmissible and more infective. And I think that's something worth remembering for the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic.
Sir, you're muted, sir.
Thank you, Raja. Raja.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, at this minute, we are having 8,341 logins.
Breaking news. Breaking news. So I will take the break and Krishna will tell you the breaking news.
Cheers. The credit goes to everyone.
Dr. Murli Mohan, again to you. Because Krishna said me that yes, the most difficult question you can ask to either Raja or Dr. Mohan. So we have two options. So next option is Dr. Murli Mohan. What have been the arguments of the drastic team or the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists lab leak theory? Why does the WHO still have to say that there is still a lot that needs to be discovered about origin of the Wuhan virus? Dr. Murli Mohan.
You're muted.
Dr. Murli, please unmute yourself.
I wasn't expecting to answer any questions for some time, so I muted myself. Right. So actually, I find the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists arguments very, very persuasive. And I mean, they cover every aspect of it. Some of it has already been discussed both by you and by Raja earlier. And it starts with the place of origin, which I think you all have already spoken about. The distance between Yunnan and Wuhan, 1,500 kilometers. The range of the bat, which is 50 kilometers, and the fact that they haven't found this infection in the people in Yunnan, which you'd expect to happen if it moves from the bats into humans around the Yunnan caves and then moves further and further. You'd expect to see the footprints of the virus in Yunnan first and then spreading slowly to Wuhan, and this has not happened. The second is, of course, that the first cases, if you remember, reported sometime in September. The temperatures in the area are already dropping. Remember, this is North China, which can get very, very cold. And in that stage, the bats actually go into hibernation. So what happens is when you have hibernating bats, you don't expect it to cross over into humans. So that's, again, very, very unlikely. And remember, this is a highly, highly transmissible virus. So it's not going to jump from one place to the other with one person and leave everybody in between perfectly safe. So that is the first argument that the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists article made. The second is how, the natural history of the bats and the natural history of the virus in the bats has spread into humans. And what you see is that Raja has already referred to this when he spoke about the ferret influenza virus and how you had to have repeated passages of the virus to make it adapt to humans. That is not what happened here. In SARS-1 also, there were about 14 changes of the virus before the epidemic really took off. And I think it took another 4 before this happened. In SARS, you have a virus which suddenly looks like it's already adapted to humans. And this doesn't usually happen in nature. So you have a big difference between the natural transition of a virus to become infected to humans and what happens with the SARS-CoV-2 virus. The third is something that many people have spoken about. David Baltimore, a renowned virologist, said as soon as he saw this, he recognized a smoking gun and something has been fired. And this is the furin cleavage site. This is a tiny part of the virus, but it's something that doesn't usually happen in viruses. It's what you get in humans. And it tells you specifically that the furin cleavage site is something that allows you to recognize that between the two, we've been doing this, these antibodies to the different proteins on the virus. And one is the S1 virus, virus protein, and the other is the S2 virus protein. The S2 helps you to fuse with the cell membrane, while the S1 enables you to anchor onto the human cell. But what you need is you need these two to be cut, then only the virus will enter the cell. So this furin cleavage site is very, very important. And normally you don't get these in viruses. Human cells have this, but now you suddenly have a virus which carries this furin cleavage site, and that allows you to recognize that this may be something that has been engineered. It may have happened naturally, but it's extremely unlikely that, it will suddenly appear in a virus all of a sudden without it having recognized the steps in between by either mutation or by recombination. So that leaves us with what is called the gain-of-function experiment, which we've been talking about. And then Dr. Amita already in the beginning told you about the very unusual sequences that you have. Several positively charged amino acids coded for by these different triplets. And you generally don't get this kind of sequence in nature. You have in SARS-CoV-2 a 12 nucleotide insert at this junction, which tells you that, this is probably not natural, that it had to have been engineered. Now, this can happen in nature because a very rapidly replicating virus is very likely to have mutations. The more the number of viruses, the more the mutations, and the more the chances that you can have a mutation that meets all these qualities. For example, they say if you get an infinite number of monkeys with an infinite number of typewriters typing away, you will ultimately generate the Encyclopedia Britannica. But that's extremely, extremely unlikely. Far more likely is this, according to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, that this was engineered or has been cultured enough through repeated passages till you got a virus that was engineered, and then you introduce that into humans. And I think that set of arguments from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists article was excellent. And remember that we've already spoken about what happened in the Yunnan mines, the Mojian mines, and the Amita has already spoken about the Ra2G13 virus that seems to, suddenly emerge from them and then be used almost identically in the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So I think the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists article is an excellent article. They had no axe to grind, and they were going for the pure science of it. And I think it's really a very believable article. The drastic paper was almost the same. The drastic researchers came in from all over. Again, people who initially were very suspicious of the conspiracy theories, and they wanted to explore it completely independently. And the more they accumulated evidence, they found that the people who were trying to hide the evidence had a strong conflict of interest, Peter Daszak being one of them, the Americans, NIH, which funded this research, being another, and of course the Chinese, starting with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, but also the Chinese party, Communist Party, as well as the military, who seem to have been closely involved in the research all the way from 2013. So very, very convincing articles.
Wonderful, Dr. Mohan. Really, it is very nice to listen to you always. So all mysterious questions I have kept for Dr. Anita. Dr. Anita Nene, be ready for our next mysterious question. Why the life in China is so normal? You see, it's like there's that we created the nuisance, we spread the nuisance, and now we are very cool. So why this kind of situation is in China? Well, the rest of the world is struggling. Do they have a special vaccine? Do they have do boond of Amrit? Or do they have any special mantra? Dr. Amita Nene.
Yeah, it is really a very frustrating thought, that why their life is normal and why our life is so messed up, currently. So I want to just go back to what I actually said. So 2012, we had those miners who went into the caves of the Yunnan province and they fell sick. Retrospectively, we know that they had an illness which is similar exactly to the COVID illness that we have currently. They had subpleural ground glass opacities, they had pulmonary thromboembolism, and they also had secondary fungal infections. And they were treated with steroids, blood thinners, and antivirals. So whatever, this had happened in 2012. And then after that, all the blood samples were sent in the Wuhan lab, and repeatedly people from Wuhan lab kept on going to these caves and they kept on collecting samples from the bat droppings. Now that happens in 2012, and in 2013, in a path-breaking research, the bat woman tells us that she has isolated this virus, which actually jumps the intermediate host and infects humans directly from bats. So this is over. They don't say from where it is arisen. And now in 2020, the structure is exactly similar, but that part is kind of hidden. So I personally feel that this all suggests that right from 2013, they had the virus ready with them. Probably they were not trying to use it as a bioweapon. They were probably doing genetic engineering manipulation for their research, but they very well had this entire virus. And therefore, I personally feel that they knew exactly the insertion, they knew the exact genetic sequence. And in 2020 February, when Dr. Shi Zulgi writes a paper about the structure of the SARS-CoV-2, within a week, a Chinese scientist actually asks his government and he allows for permission to license his vaccine against SARS-CoV-2. So, I mean, within 1 week of knowing the structure, you are actually ready with the vaccine and you're asking for government permission to license it. So this sounds extremely like this is not possible at all. Over here, we are talking about vaccines within 3 months and people are screaming and shouting and not ready to take them. And over here, within a week, you are ready to really roll out your vaccine. So I personally feel that the structure was already known to them. They were probably thinking there might be a lab leak because they knew that the lab was not really geared up for things. And therefore, I personally feel that they had the antidote, the vaccine. I'm not really sure if it's the same vaccine which is being given out, Sinopharm, etc., to the rest of the world, because they don't seem to respond the way Chinese are responding. And also, they are rolling out vaccine to children from 3 years of age, which is really strange because Pfizer is thinking about starting with children of 12 years, and these people have already rolled out for children of 3 years plus. So I personally feel they had the entire genome and they had the antidote, the magical vaccine.
So they have the problem and they have the solution, but they don't want to share this solution. I think this is the scenario which you have, of course, narrated very well. Dr. Mohan, again, a difficult question for you. What is the concept about biological black boxes?
So before that, I want to just mention, I've sent you an interesting photograph of President Xi of China in February 2020. I've sent it to you on WhatsApp. I've sent it to some of the other groups. He's wearing an ordinary surgical mask and he's visiting a hospital in Wuhan. This is February 2020. Makes me very suspicious that they've already been protected with a vaccine. And I mean, we've seen our politicians going out in political rallies with no protection at all. But I don't imagine President Xi would do that. And this is highly suspicious to me. You know what Dr. Amita was saying? There is strong evidence. And I think this is like another smoking gun that there is. Sorry, sir, you were asking about the biological black box. So when a plane crashes, there is a black box. It's actually orange in color, but peculiarly it's called a black box. So when this black box is one of the first things that investigators try to retrieve after a plane crash. And what happens is you have to go into it and you see what is the last stages. And this captures all kind of information. It captures what the conversation in the cockpit is. It captures the altitude, the rate of change of altitude, and all the other information, the data that exists throughout the flight, but especially so they look at the moments before the crash. That gives you a lot of information. So it has been suggested that labs that deal with biological substances, we're not talking about biological weapons alone, should have a similar monitoring policy where everything in the lab, including the temperature, the possibility of leaks, the experiments that are done, are all captured in real time and are available for analysis in the case of an accident or otherwise. And the Chinese have been peculiarly opaque about their willingness to share such information, whether it exists or not. They're not allowing people to come in. And now when all traces of the infection have died out, it's probably too late to capture this kind of information. And that's where a black box would be very useful. So that is the concept of a biological black box. There's incidentally another black box that we're talking about, which was brought up by Darwin a long time ago. And he says, when you know nothing about a certain creature, a biological substance, then it is like a black box. It's completely opaque. And it's been used by arguments for, a natural origin, natural evolution on the one hand, and, what is called intelligent creation. So you think about God has created, all kinds of creatures with great complexity, and this cannot happen by accident. And that's the other black box that you're talking about, which is particularly opposite to this argument. Did the virus originate naturally by natural evolution, or was it engineered? Is there some intelligent design behind it?
Thank you, Dr. Mohan. And
Raja, I think wants to add something, sir.
Yeah, Raja, yes.
Yeah, Dr. Suryakant, very quickly. So I think one of the things that Murli brought out, just to sort of add to what we are discussing today. So I think the reason we are doing this panel discussion today is not to incriminate or to mudsling. Yes. I think it's ideas like this. So Murli spoke about the black box, which is a suggestion which has come to forth after this Wuhan catastrophe. There's also the question of trying to find out the origin of a pandemic so that future pandemics can actually be prevented. The question of vaccination and whether these gain of function experiments can be carried on in the future, because there is a worth to them also if they can be carried out safely. I think that's something which is important. So I think important to point out here that the exercise that we are doing today is not to incriminate a country or an individual, but to make sure that if we know the origin, going forward, there'll be a lot of worth in future pandemics which we can use in controlling that particular pandemic.
Yeah, Raja, you are correct. Yes, you see, mistake can happen with anyone, but it is wise to accept the mistake so that it should not be repeated in future. So I think Dr. Murli is very...
Agam wants to say something. Agam.
Yeah, Agam, yes.
It reminds me of a joke and I can't resist myself. Can I?
Yes.
When you talk about this black box, it reminds me of a joke. There's a plane which crashes.
Yeah.
And everybody dies. There's nobody is left. Even the black box is not found. People go and look for it, and black box is also not found. But there is one monkey which is left, and monkey is alive. So then they decide to get information from monkey. So they kind of train the monkey and then do the analysis, and psychotherapy is given, and then finally he's in the room where analysis is going on. So all these psychiatrists and psychotherapists are sitting, and they said, when the plane crashed, were you there? They said, okay, good, confirm. When the plane crashed, what was pilot doing? He makes a very funny face of, as if he's smooching somebody. I can't do that on screen. I'm not expert in doing that. So then they realize, okay. Pilot was busy. What was the air hostess doing? So he also makes the similar face, making you realize that the pilot and the air hostess were busy. And then what were you doing? I was
And that was the reason of that crash. Wow. Great. Agam, you are always full of humor. Great. So Murli is very, very prompt. You see, this is the photograph which he has sent to me. I can show you all of, if it is visible. Yes. Yes.
Sir, you can, Vinod, you can send it to group and Vinod will put it here.
Yeah. Sure.
You put it in the group, sir. And
okay, I'll put it in the group. Vinod. I'm sending to Vinod only.
Fantastic, sir.
Okay. Dr. Mohan, are you ready? Dr. Mohan, the next question is coming again to you. Irrespective of what we find, eventually, sorry, this is not the question. What are the various mutants of COVID-19, and can you tell the region why they are not affecting the Chinese? We are I think 12 kind of mutant strand we have learned till date, till 14th of June. Why these mutants? I mean, why the Chinese are not worried of these mutants, and why they are not being involved and infected by these mutants?
I honestly don't think that is true, sir. I think the Chinese are also affected.
Excuse me. Before the question goes to Dr. Murli Mohan, Krishna wants to play his Murli now.
Yeah.
We have 8,921 logins.
Ooh.
Wow, breaking news again.
As of now.
Okay.
Please continue, Murli, sir.
Yeah. So I don't think that the Chinese are unaffected. But there are two things that happened. They were very alert once the pandemic started. They didn't alert anybody else immediately. You remember they tried to suppress the ophthalmologist Lee's, report. He died in February, but he alerted them first in November. And there are probably traces this well before that. The problem is the Chinese system is a fairly tight system. It's a very disciplined system. You must admire the Chinese for that. Extremely disciplined people. They follow rules. They follow rules very, very strictly. And the rules are also enforced very strictly. We enjoy the freedoms that we have, but it comes at a certain price. We are an undisciplined country by and large, and undisciplined people. Good and bad things about it. The Chinese are extremely disciplined. The second thing is they are very close-mouthed. They do not come out with their data very easily. There were reports, these have been disputed, that in the immediate aftermath of the November to February, about 21 million mobile accounts disappeared from China. There are many reasons for this. It's not necessarily that 21 billion people died, but certainly the number of phone accounts, mobile accounts, and in China, you cannot survive without mobile accounts. You need it for everything. You need it to move from one place to the other. Everything is done on the phone, and that has disappeared completely. Even if you assume that 10% of these were due to deaths, you still have an enormous number of deaths. There may be other reasons, but for the disappearance of mobile accounts, including failure of those mobile companies, but something clearly changed there. And now there are again reports that new variants are surfacing in China and new variants are spreading. The thing is, other countries report it. We ourselves are probably guilty of underreporting. That's what the recent excess death seems to signal. I don't think it is malicious intent. Again, some of it is our, failure to report rather than malicious intent. But the Chinese are very good at collecting data and keeping the data to themselves. They don't. Again, this, to emphasize what Raja said earlier, this is not to blame a country, not to blame a people. This is not meant to be racist, but it's just that different systems function in different ways. And we wish they had been more open about it in the future to alert the whole world that something is coming your way. And here we have some ready-made answers.
So thank you, Mohan. I think in continuation with this, you see the situation coming like this, like China have all the data, all the stories, but they don't want to share. The question.
Sir, the photo is ready. Sir, the photo is ready. Can you put it, sir?
Yeah, sure. Wow, Vinod, great. So this was the photo. Dr. Murli, you have brought a fantastic thing. Yes, you can see very well, very clear photo. Yes, he is wearing the ordinary mask. Okay, thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. Vinod. Wonderful technical support you are giving. Okay. So now question to Dr. Agam-Vohra. What do we do about accountability and transparency? How do we ensure that the supposed country of origin of a virus supports the investigation thoroughly?
Oof. What can we do about it? Too much. I really doubt, because it looks that they had some intent of, probably there was some ill reasons behind it, though there are
some kind of intention,
some kind of bad intentions. I remember Krishna was there in the last year. Krishna, if you can mute people and you can stop transmission for a minute. Remind me of the time where you were at China and you called me up with some new friend there and she had that cough you were talking about. I don't know whether that was the reason from where it all started, but then I really don't know. And what can we do about it? I think it is your individual moral responsibility to be transparent and to be accountable when the whole world is at stake. It cannot be taken lightly. But it reminds me of that funny quote. It says, "प्यार में पड़े लड़के, चाय में गिरे बिस्किट, and हवा में गिरे कोरोना को तो तबाही फैलानी है, कोई बचा नहीं सकता." So it's like we are going to have tough time.
Just repeat one more time. क्या बोला? चाय में गिरे बिस्किट क्या?
प्यार में पड़े लड़के,
हाँ,
चाय में डूबे हुए बिस्किट, and हवा में फैले हुए कोविड
वायरस कोरोना, कोई नहीं,
बचना मुश्किल है, कोई नहीं
बचना मुश्किल है.
Thank you.
नोट कर लो भाई. Okay. Wonderful. Raja. So I think Raja is always ready. The question is, again, a very difficult question to you. May 1st, 2020, Donald Trump declined to assert that the virus had occurred naturally. However, the Nature paper from 2020, although you have already mentioned it, and then subsequent WHO investigate team have maintained that this can't be a man-made virus. What are the factors which go in favor of this virus being natural?
So I think, Dr. Suryakant, this is the other side of the coin.
Yes. Yeah.
That Dr. Murali read out.
So we are having balanced panel discussion.
Yeah,
we are
absolutely
not biased.
balanced.
So we are not biased.
So I'll quote what was said in the Nature paper and in the Lancet paper in defense of this virus being natural. So the first thing that they said was that this viral genome will actually tell you whether the virus is natural or whether it's been man-made. So it didn't go into any details as to how that would be, but a gentleman called Dr. Robertson said that the world would have known if this genome had actually been artificially engineered. It also went on to speak about what Amita spoke about very eloquently, the RATG13, and they said that the similarity between the RATG13 and the SARS-CoV-2 virus was the difference between a human and a chimpanzee. So this is not me making it up, it's straight from that paper. And it talks about so 96% similarity and a 4% difference. So the 4% difference translates into the difference between a human and a chimpanzee. And I always thought that we actually evolved quite a lot from being a chimpanzee, but obviously not. Anyway, so that was the second point of similarity. The third point that they said was that there was nothing to prove that it was engineered in the lab. This is from the Nature paper. So if you look at the arguments, so Dr. Murali Mohan provided a list of about 9 arguments in favor of the fact that this might be an accident in the lab. I am struggling to provide you with 3 reasons as to why this virus is natural. And you wonder why the World Health Organization, other big journals, why the US, certain people in the US, for instance, which has aided the Wuhan lab, are actually propounding this to be a natural virus. So that's the best answer I can provide. And you can sort of understand from my weak answer, Dr. Suryakant, that I'm struggling to provide arguments in favor of this virus being natural.
Thank you, Raja. Wonderful. Now question to Dr. Anita Nene. Are there any actions on part of the Chinese government or the Wuhan lab authorities that make you feel suspicious that they have a role in entire pandemic? Dr. Amita, please.
Okay, so according to me, every action on the part of the Wuhan lab or the Chinese government, each and every action makes the entire world extremely suspicious. So basically the thing is that if you want to know whether this was natural or man-made, anybody will want to go to the Wuhan lab and they'll want to see what the lab is all about. And what have the lab people done? They've completely closed the entire lab to everybody. So nobody has the access to the Wuhan lab at all. This is very, very suspicious. So if I feel I'm not done anything wrong, I'll be like, come and check, everything is clean. Over here, they want to close it. That's number one. The second thing is, if not here, then people want to go to the mines of Yunnan, from where the horseshoe bats were discovered, and from the people the miners who got infected, from them, exactly the same structure, RTG, was discovered. So people would want to go over there. But then those caves have also been completely locked. Whoever has tried to go over there, nobody has access. They have been blocked and nobody is allowed to go into caves, which is very suspicious. What is most intriguing is that before actually the SARS-CoV-2 cases were reported from China, a few weeks before, the scientists who were working in the Wuhan lab actually fell sick. And they had a viral illness which was very similar to the COVID virus illness, but these cases are being hidden. So basically, this actually got exposed because of certain emails which were traced, but they are trying to hide from the world that people working in the same lab actually got infected before the Wuhan people got infected, which says it was a leak. That is one interesting thing that they are trying to hide. And what is most interesting is that all the database of all the coronaviruses that they had has suddenly gone off the net. All the thesis, all the publications, all the studies about the research which used to be available on the internet, which they were so proud about, has gone completely offline. It's not just available at all to the world. And what is most intriguing is, supporting what Raja was saying, is that some very interesting research from our scientists and from scientists across the world, where they tried to suggest that this virus was actually man-made, those papers were actually published. And because of some bureaucratic conspiracy, these papers had to be withdrawn. So we basically know that there were a lot of these mighty people who were basically supporting the entire project, and they don't want to be involved in this. And so basically all these things actually tell us that everything is suspicious. It's really a big khichdi, I would say that.
So in a nutshell, we can say that they swing towards the mystery. And Dr. Krishna, this is the last question of the panel discussion. Of course, you have to end by your answer. What is the funding connection of virus research at Wuhan Institute of Virology with USA, and what is its impact?
Sir, actually, there are three aspects here. And the third aspect has been widely covered already, that is GOF, altogether by everyone here. By gain of funding is covered by Amita Neni, it's covered by Dr. Muralidhar, it is covered by Murali Mohan, I'm sorry, Dr. Murali Mohan, and also Dr. Rajadhar, in fact, some touch from Agamor also. So what
I didn't fund anything.
Your joke was the gain of
gain of function.
Gain of webinar. So actually, the other two theories which they put across, Americans, in supporting this, other than the GOF, first is, the first reason, as Mike Pompeo himself said this, it is to help bring Chinese labs up to a higher safety standards. That's why we funded them. So, and this particular thing that even the Wuhan lab itself being the best standard lab, I don't understand why again they wanted to make it more standardized, like even became the quaternary. So this is one point. Second point, what they tell is, it's always like funding and having a forced international relationship, and you fund others, you take funding from them for scientific development, scientific researches. So this give and take happens. And US is not the first country ever to do this outside US. It's in China itself. It's already done across in Germany. It has happened in Germany. It has happened in many European countries that they have outsourced it and they have got it done. So this mutual exchange was essential, and that's why we did. That is the reason that is provided by US government, other than what we have talked about. And before I now we have got 8981 logins, and this is a history. 8981 logins is a history. I'm very sure that we are almost near 9,000, which we may reach by the time we end up. And so, Suryakant sir, I think with my answer, you can start winding up things, and I'll speak at the end.
Okay. So thank you very much for all important office bearer and stakeholders of the Chess Council of India. And thank you very much all about 9,000 attendees who attended, including the stalwarts like Dr. MC Mishra, ex-director of AIIMS New Delhi, and some media fellows, some other even non-medical personnel. So I think this panel discussion has benefited our fraternity. Not only the fraternity, I think I think this is my personal request to Krishna and all other panelists to help and to pen down all these conclusions and resolutions passed during this panel discussion. And even what can we do? We can have a white paper on this issue, and we can publish this white paper in a very important journal. I think Raja will take the lead on compiling all these data, figures, important aspects which were discussed. And I think we will search a suitable journal. And then, of course, this is my suggestion. Yes, I think most of you will be agree for this. And first time in the last 18 months, we can go for this white paper on origin of COVID-19 virus. And I think
it's for the CCI journal first.
Yes, yes. It can be the first article. Yes, it can be the first article. Of course, editor-in-chief is agree. Then, of course, it can be the first article.
So I think let's pass the resolution. It is the request coming from Dr. Suryakant sir and Dr. Murli Mohan sir. Back sit up. Raja writes the article and puts our name there. It's done.
Fantastic, Raghav, you are great. So, you see, all film directors, which they want to make a humor film, they are taking directions from Dr. Agam Vora. You know, this is the mysterious. This is also mysterious. So I think at the end, I am really thankful to the CIPLA of our technical partner, Mr. Vinod, wonderful technical support. And your team is fantastic. If I start from Atri, from Ranchi to Ravi Doshi from Indore, and of course, Krishna, of course, it is always sometimes on the Murli, off the Murli. I don't know. And somebody was, Agam was telling that in China also you are playing Murli. A lot of Gopiya was there. So,
bada khiladi, I must tell you.
So I think, and thank you, my esteemed, of course, panelists, Dr. Agam Vora, Dr. Amita Nene from Mumbai, Dr. Rajadhar from Kolkata, Dr. Murli Mohan from Bangalore, and of course himself, Dr. Krishna from the Karnataka. And of course, your founder secretary, Dr. Pradeep, and the president secretary of the Chess Council of India. And if I left some important name, forgive me, because my association with Chess Council of India is not too long. I'm really a few months. That is my association with this. But really, I'm very more than satisfied, more than overwhelmed that you people are doing wonderful job. And my great sweet wish to all the great success for you. Thank you very much.
I also must thank you before Krishna says that the wonderful moderation.
Absolutely.
I mean, without a wonderful moderator, this kind of program cannot see the success. And you have done that fantastic job, right from your initial talk to your comments, to your questions, to asking all those, different questions to everybody has really made this program interesting. Raja, me and Krishna were having very heated discussion about this COVID care. COVID can, we need to find some solution and where it came from and how will we be able to get rid of this COVID. And he said, someone ate an apple somewhere and we were born. Someone ate a bat there and we are dying. We said the problem is only with eating and there is no problem with drinking. And see what fantastic solution he gave. So that's what Krishna all about. I thank everybody for giving me the opportunity. Thank my co-panelists for being there and taking care of all difficult questions. Thanks, Amita. Thanks, Raja. Thanks, Dr. Murli Mohan. And of course, great thanks to Krishna. 1,000+ delegates, 10,000 delegates nearly who are there. Mishra sir, the media friends, and of course, the House of CIPLA. Thank you, everybody. Over to
a line from Dr. Murli Mohan and Dr. Amita and Dr. Rajadhar. A line.
Yeah, so I think this is not a fault finding, but a fact finding exercise. I hope we've got a little further. The question of the origin of the virus is still open, but I think we are tending towards a possible solution. And again, we have no enmity towards anybody, but we want truth to come out, and we want science to triumph.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Murali Mohan. Dr. Rajadhar, please, your take.
So I'll continue from where Murli finished. I think the world should actually assist all of us, all of the people who want the truth. And unless that happens, we are really going to be stuck with the future mutations, the future pandemics coming in, and the question of vaccines for these pandemics will always remain an open question. So we need more transparency, more accountability from various nations, not just from China, but from various nations. And if that doesn't happen, then the truth that Murli spoke about is never going to come to fore, irrespective of how many webinars we do. So I think that's very, very important. Transparency and accountability is what we seek and request from this particular panel discussion.
Dr. Amita, thank you so much, Dr. Rajadhar. Fantastic. Dr. Amita.
I basically feel that, because of a disease that originated in China, the entire world is going through a very bad phase. We've lost our loved ones, and therefore there's a lot of anger. So basically, I think that because there's so much of anger, the accountability and transparency is really important, and they should rather be forthright in giving all the information. So when this doesn't happen, there is anger. So that anger part is important. I wish they realize this and they want to come out in the open. And I feel that by they telling us about the facts that they know, it will only help the mankind, and probably we could save more lives. And therefore, I feel that it would be good if other things which are hidden are told to the world, so that other people also can come up with better options and we can truly save more lives.
Thank you, Dr. Amita. And I would like to add in special here, two great people behind the screen. They never came out. Mr. Kaustubh from CIPLA and Mr. Vipul Ranjan from CIPLA. They are high, like this show should go to them. What they have done is a brilliant thing. You know about Krishna, you know about Narayan Pradeep, you know about Channam Chetty, but Vinod also, I'll tell you, fantastic person, the technical head. He is the reason behind the success of CCI. And thanks today, Kaustubh and Vipul, perfect, ultimate, amazing. So thanks Team CIPLA in total, and thanks Team CCI in entire total. And I thank all my panelists. That is such a brainy panel. Why I choose, because so that I remain silent and none of my faults get caught and I remain stress-free. So my intention of choosing such a bright panel is very same, and fantastic moderation by Suryakant sir. Big and ultimate two Einsteins at the same platform, Dr. Murali Mohan and Dr. Rajadhar. This could probably like at the right place, we got the right scientists. Agam, you made our day. Had you not been there, imagine from 7:45 we were sitting and it's now 9:58, 9:55. So you made our day. Now, at the end, I would like to give a message on behalf of CC and the entire panel of mine here. Although it is not our intention to throw pelt stones at somebody, it is very important to understand that someone has to speak. You cannot leave it like that. Everybody cannot sit and watch. If you talk regarding the failure of a system, then it is you who elected and voted those politicians to come into power. You have to be blamed. You cannot blame the politics, you cannot blame the system. So ultimately, someone has to speak and someone has to ask. If you do not ask, if you do not speak, you will not even clear your first standard in your school. So that amount of courage, dareness for such a huge disease, which is never probably, I don't see that an immediate end is arriving here. For such a disease, if you do not have the courage to ask, if you do not have the courage to elaborate, then it is not myself alone, it is the entire world that is in the problem. Hence, we have done our best to communicate, and all these things, what we have told here, were not biased. It was everything what we quoted here were documented and fetched with some proper sources. So thank you on behalf of Chess Council of India to all those like brilliant 8,981 viewers over here. Thanks everyone. Thanks everyone. Thank you so much. Jai Hind. Namaste.